Hey everyone, Coach Will here, and today I wanted to address a trend that I see in sport as well as fitness all the time, and that is either suboptimal or non-existent warm-ups. So, when done appropriately, warm-ups may serve to reduce injury risk, they can enhance performance for sport, and I think that they can best prepare an athlete for the session to come, both physically, psychologically, technically, and tactically. So with that said, I think we can probably do a little bit better than 5 minutes of biking before you work out. Now, with that in mind, I don't think there's one optimal strategy for doing a warm-up, but I do think that there are going to be two broad criteria that your warm-ups should meet. So the first one is, can it further enhance athlete readiness? So is the protocol rationally structured so that the segments relate to the sport or the training, as well as does it relate to the athlete themselves? So specifically, the athlete's training capacity, their injury history, where they are within their season. All these things we're going to factor in terms of preparing and making sure that the program is going to be valid for them. And then the second criteria that I think it needs to meet is, does it actually further enhance athlete readiness in practice? So is the coach able to communicate all aspects of the protocol to the athlete, and is the athlete actually able to apply it to their life to make sure that they get the best benefit from it? Ultimately, I find within this section, the KISS principle heavily applies. So ensuring that we keep things as simple as possible, ensuring that we do simple well. So with that in mind, I want to go over a little bit of a warm-up protocol that I personally use. So I like to use the RAMP protocol. The RAMP protocol was developed by Dr. Ian Jeffries, and it can be structured in 3 different stages. So RAMP protocol, actually RAMP is going to be an acronym. It stands for Raise, Activate, and Mobilize, and then Potentiate. These different segments are meant to build on each other, and they help to further enhance overall transition of specific skills. When we look at the raise stage, the first stage, we're trying to elicit key physiological and psychological outcomes. So we're trying to elevate heart rate, we're trying to elevate rate of respiration, we're trying to improve mental arousal and focus, as well as increase muscular temperature. We're trying to influence and improve viscoelastic properties of musculature, and we're also trying to increase synovial fluid in the joints for better shock absorption. Now, with this section, I do think that you should be starting at lower levels of intensity or complexity, and then gradually over time, potentially over a period of 5 to 10 minutes, be increasing up to a moderate level of intensity. Now, these exercises can either incorporate some form of sports skills that you might happen to be working on. So these could be dribbling or jockeying for position, or they could be specific movements. So that could be specific running drills at lower intensities like your A-skips, or they can be specific running based drills regarding kind of controlled change of direction, emphasizing key phases and your overall biomechanics. So ensuring that, when you're coming to a complete stop, you're able to get into that low athletic position or that stable position, and then allowing your body to then transition using your hips, driving off the leg into that overall acceleration phase or that initiation phase again. Now, regardless of kind of what the outcome is in terms of the stated physiological or psychological factors that you're trying to get out of the raise stage, your overall focus on the raise stage should be movement quality. So how well are your athletes moving within this stage, and ensuring that you maintain coaching within this stage as well too. Now, like I say, it doesn't always have to be specific, but trying to get it as specific as you can, and making sure that your athletes are moving better even after that first 5 to 10 minutes of your session. Now, ultimately, what these specific drills look like, again, is going to be heavily based on the athlete and the sport factors, but really just focusing on that overall technique, overall quality of form is going to be key importance for the raise section. Next, we would get into the activate and mobilize section, and there we're going to be really emphasizing using specific musculature across a specific range of motion and trying to directly address kind of mobility and stability of specific joints and movement patterns. So I find that mobility is going to require a significant deal of motor control, and also being able to stabilize at an end range position. If you think of somebody, in a low squat position, especially being able to squat down to that position and maintain and stabilize in that point, it does require a great amount of mobility, and a great amount of overall control. So I think that when you are doing the activate and mobilize portion, you should really be concentrating on trying to be very slow, or at least slow within that movement as you go, trying to make it as fluid as possible. Now, like I say, it doesn't have to be 10 seconds on that descending portion of a squat, but it can be relatively controlled. You're not whipping your position into there. You're not going into some very ballistic type movements as well for this, because you really want to avoid momentum trying to get you into a greater end range position. Now, ultimately within the activate and mobilize section, I like to focus on some key movement patterns and address at least 3 to 5 of these. So I like to focus on jumping, squatting, lunging. Some bending and reaching is going to be huge as well too, especially as an athlete wants to be incorporating more kind of complicated based movements, being able to effectively go into lateral bend while stabilizing through the trunk, or reaching into position, getting your shoulder blades gliding along the rib cage in that proper scapulothoracic rhythm is always going to be incredibly important. Then we're going to be looking at kind of rotational based drills as well too. So that can be something that we see where that rotation, that power comes through the hips, and being able to join the hips and the upper body, the hips and the shoulders specifically throughout movement is going to be key for that rotation. We're then going to be looking at pushing, pulling based movements, making sure that if you are utilizing them, that they are going to be specific to the session that you are going to be undergoing as well too, to have some level of transfer as well. Now, with that in mind, when you are doing specific movement patterns, you might notice in yourself or in your athletes specific kind of dysfunctions. So you might see that when you're squatting, the knees knock in a little bit. Same thing when you're going to a lunge, there might be a significant kind of medial deviation or drifts towards your midline. What you might do in those circumstances is institute or implement specific activation type exercises, and those ones will seek to actively build on specific deficiencies that you might have observed. So that can be, popping a mini band around the knees and focusing on some monster walks where you're going into that athletic position and doing diagonal steps to work on glute med, and to really work on kind of stabilizing through the hips and bringing that awareness in. All these things can be kind of incorporated, but I generally focus on, again, what those key dysfunctions might happen to be for the individual, or where that deficiency happens to be, and then ensuring that you're doing the biggest bang for your buck. So again, when we're looking at our warm-up protocols, we're usually looking at under 15-20 minutes. So trying to make the best of our time there, picking our big rocks and trying to really implement them is going to be key. Now, with that in mind, I do want to kind of touch on soft tissue based release, so foam rolling, that type of thing. And ultimately, I do think those have a point, and those do have a place within the activate and mobilize section, and that's where you would most likely implement them. I do think you need to be kind of frugal with how you're implementing them, using them for 1 to 2 specific muscle groups potentially, because ultimately what ends up happening there is you are going to be decreasing overall tension in a particular area, which might increase range of motion in a particular area. But if you are not undergoing specific movement patterns that will better help you stabilize in that new end range position, you do run the risk of just having it be a very transient effect. So I can roll out my lats, but my lats are tight for a reason. And until I address that by going through appropriate movement patterns, my lats are going to remain tight, and I'm not necessarily going to be having any major benefit from the foam rolling that I spent time with. When we're looking at potentiation, the third stage, we're really looking to kind of build on the previous stages. And we're looking to kind of act as a bridge by increasing intensity and involving a higher degree of focus on specific drills that are going to be highly specific for the upcoming session. Now, We can be increasing complexity of the drill, increasing the intensity of the drill, increasing your overall need to focus on the drill as well too. So if you're out in the field in terms of a sport-based thing, this can be incorporating an actual opponent now. So you're going to be dribbling the ball towards an opponent, and then based on how your opponent moves, by watching their hips, you have to do that immediate change of direction, and this could be done at a higher intensity. Now again, like I say, this is going to specifically be dictated based on the sport, based on the athlete, based on the skill level, but ensuring that we are having that bridge component is going to be huge to develop that overall robustness. Now I do find actually that with potentiation in the gym, this tends to be where individuals actually kind of naturally have it built in. We see that individuals, when they're going to go into a specific lift, especially as their main lift, they will be doing warm-up sets. Generally you won't necessarily see a guy do 5 minutes of on the bike, immediately put 2 plates on the bench press and bang out. You'll see it every now and then, but ideally you'll see them do 1 or 2 warm-up sets, and that actually can help to potentiate. It can help to allow your body to become accustomed with increasing intensities without naturally kind of fatiguing the body past the point that you as an athlete can recover from. Now, in the gym, I find this a little bit more effective as well too, is individuals will start to use contrasting based movements where they might be pairing a higher load type movement followed after a brief rest time with a higher velocity type movement. So you might see somebody do a heavy squat, rest for 2 to 3 minutes, and then go into some jumping. Now again, making sure that in this case they are going to be trying to create as much force as they possibly can in both the higher load type movement, the back squat, and the higher velocity type movement in the jump. And this is kind of forming something called post-activation potentiation, where the heavy squat is actually acutely increasing the neuromuscular activity, and then provided that fatigue is allowed to dissipate effectively, you will then have that higher increased neuromuscular activity when you go into something like the high jump. Now, making sure, again, like I say, that we are allowing active rest time, sufficient rest time when we're going into the potentiation phase is going to be key. And ultimately, when you're applying all 3 of these phases within the ramp phase, you should see that enhanced athlete readiness as well going into the major session. With that said, if you guys have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, stay safe, have fun. We're all in this together. Thanks.